On this week's NESN Patriots podcast, we break down what Sunday's thrilling last-minute win over the Buffalo Bills means for Mac Jones and New England. We also discuss why this weekend's game against Miami could shape the rest of the Patriots season and spotlight the biggest questions posed by the report about Bill Belichick's contract extension. Hello and welcome in to this week's edition of the NESN Patriots podcast. My name is Zack, joined as always by Dakota, Randall, and in a rarity today, we are going to be breaking down a come-from-behind, last-minute Patriots victory against a quality NFL opponent. It's not hyperbole to say that the Patriots have not had a win like they had yesterday in several years. 29-25 over the Buffalo Bills. Mac Jones led a late touchdown drive to win the game for the Patriots and really salvage whatever they have left of their season. Dakota, before we get into all the particulars of this game, just Mac Jones, the Patriots offense, get the ball back just under 2 minutes left in this game. What's your reaction when the offense is coming back onto the field?
Well, I think I had the same reaction that all of us did, and is that they will find some way to screw this up. And it sure looked like they were going to when Ramondre Stevenson broke off that big run after the catch, after the screen, and there was the penalty, I believe, illegal man downfield on David Andrews. It looked like that was right in line with what we've come to expect from this team, where they had the lead, they blew it. Kendrick Bourne fumbled, the Bills take the lead. It all sort of was going according to plan. But the refs pick up the flag, which I think was maybe the biggest play in the game. And then obviously it went from there, and the Patriots got, a rare win in this scenario. And so rare, in fact, that I just brought up a tweet from Mike Reese last night, that in the last 30 years, the Patriots have had 3 games in which they scored a go-ahead receiving touchdown with less than 15 seconds left. The first was in 1998, Drew Bledsoe to Ben Coates with 0 seconds left against the Bills. The second was in 2013, Tom Brady to Kembrell Tompkins, the Unicorn Show Ponies Where's the Beef game. And then last night with Mac Jones to Mike Gesicki with 12 seconds left against the Bills. So I think me, like everyone else in the stadium, did not think that was going to happen. The Patriots had given you absolutely no reason to believe that they could do it. And then against all odds, they get it done. And I think they get full credit for that game. I know some people want to, find fault with it by pointing out that the Bills were banged up on defense, that they're kind of a mess right now. And I do think all of that's fair. Like, I don't think you were facing a fully loaded, fully locked in Bills team, but I still think, by and large, this is the best win of Mac Jones' career and the best win for the Patriots in a long time. It was really a throwback style win, right down to the silver pants.
You mentioned that stat about this being the first kind of game-winning touchdown in the final 15 seconds in a full decade. That was one of several streaks or droughts or whatever you want to call it that ended in this game. I mean, this was the first fourth quarter comeback and game-winning drive for Mac Jones since week 5 of the 2021 season. That was that game against the Houston Texans early in his rookie year. Even that was under different circumstances because the Patriots were tied at the time of that game-winning drive. It's the first time since drafting Jones that the Patriots have beaten a team that has scored 25 or more points. And it's the first time since week 5 of last season, so over a calendar year, that they've beaten an opposing quarterback who was not either a backup or Zach Wilson. As you mentioned, this wasn't a full strength, fully loaded Bills team. They were missing some key pieces, especially over on defense. And I think Josh Allen certainly did not have his greatest game, but this was the kind of quote unquote signature win that we've been looking for Mac Jones and the Patriots to have really for over a year, about a year and a half at this point. There's a question of whether this is too little too late. Obviously, it's still relatively early in the season, but this win only brought the Patriots to 2-5 on the year. And if they revert to the level of play that they had been playing at in these next couple of weeks, it's not going to matter. But that brings me to our first kind of talking point before we get down into the nitty gritty of this game. Was this a statement win that can kind of portend what's to come for the Patriots? Or was this just a fluke where they finally happened to get lucky and they are more like the team that we saw in the previous 3 weeks that just finds every possible way to lose themselves games? Where do you stand on this team coming out of a game like this?
It's not going to be the best talk radio answer, but I think the answer is somewhere in between because I don't think there are no flukes in the NFL. Like I don't think you can't that there's nothing fluky about a game like that where the Patriots, up against a real Super Bowl contender, build a 12-point fourth quarter lead, blow it, and then have that kind of drive at the end. There's nothing fluky about that. But at the same token, I don't think you can say this is a full statement for them until they repeat it and show that they can do this, multiple times. Not necessarily in this fashion, but just big wins and big spots against good teams. But that said, why maybe I lean closer to statement is because this is a slight continuation, I think, of what we saw in the second half against the Raiders, where I believe the Patriots were down 19-10. And they came back in that game and almost won. Obviously, they took the safety at the end of the game, but I think Mac Jones and the offense did some good things in that second half that made it look like maybe Bill O'Brien was starting to find his groove. And like the caveat being the Raiders aren't a very good defense, and I don't think the Bills right now are a very good defense. But nonetheless, I think you're never as good as your best win and never as bad as your worst loss. The Patriots are not as bad, and Mac Jones is not as bad as what we saw in those losses to the Saints and Cowboys. And they're probably not as good as they looked in this game either against that good of an opponent. There were some factors in play here, including the wind, which I think hampered what the Bills were able to do with some of their downfield passing. But regardless, I do think this game offered a glimpse at what the Patriots can be when they're clicking. I mean, this looked more like the Mac Jones that we saw during his rookie season, efficient, clean. The formula for them is play well on defense, get a turnover on defense, bend but don't break, don't turn the ball over, and make some complementary play in special teams. That's the formula for them to win as a team that doesn't have a lot of high-end talent. Just the problem is this season they've undercut themselves with so many turnovers. But I think we've all thought where if they clean up those turnovers and if they get stability on the offensive line, they actually might be able to put some things together and win some games. And so I guess on the glass half empty side, they're still 2-5. I think like we'll talk about in a little bit. The season's really on the line in Miami. If they lose that, they're probably sellers at the deadline. But on the other side of that, you look at it and you say, well, the two losses to the Saints and Cowboys, those are really bad. However, this team is a couple of plays here and there away from beating the Dolphins, beating the Eagles, beating the Raiders, and then you're talking about a team that's maybe 5-2, and their two losses or 4-3 or something like that. And it's a totally different conversation. The problem is that's really a continuation of a lot of what we've said, dating back to the beginning of last season, where you're like, well, I can squint and see a playoff team, but I can also squint and see a team that's far worse than their record. And with the Patriots, they almost lost that game against the Jets on a Hail Mary. So I think at the end of the day, this really is just a continuation of what we've seen from the Patriots the last couple of years, which is a team that teases you with its ability, but is maddeningly inconsistent.
Yeah, the Patriots, as you alluded to there, they've had an opportunity to do this 4 times this season. This was the 4th time that they had possession of the ball in the final minutes with the chance to either win or tie. Obviously, the first 3 attempts at that did not go their way. They were not able to score on any of those. But I think you have to give them credit just because we've been bagging on this team for years about them not being able to beat any legitimate opponents. There's always some sort of caveat in every game that they win. It's either a bad weather game or it's against a team with a backup quarterback or against a team that had its 4th string running back. You really have to go back several years, as I was saying earlier, to find a just legitimate win against a quality opponent. I mean, in the NFL, you're really, especially at this point in the season, you're never going to face a team that has all of its horses and everything is going well for it. But as banged up as the Bills were in this game, I still think this certainly qualifies. This is a box that they can check that they haven't been able to in quite a while. And I think that even though there are certainly some nitpicks you can make with this game, I think that the next step for this team is not having that 4th quarter collapse that necessitated the final game-winning drive. I think that's kind of the next level up they need to get to moving forward. But I do lean more toward statement win than fluky loss as well. That's kind of where I am with this team. But that being said, if they go down and get blown out in Miami, then they're basically right back to where they were going into this game. But let's get into the actual game itself a little bit deeper here. Do the same thing we do every week. Since this game was a victory, we'll change it up a little bit. We'll go two up, one down. Each of us for the Patriots in this game, 2 players that we think deserve spotlighting for positive things, 1 player for negative things. I'll let you kick it off, Dakota. Who do you have for your 2 up?
For me, I'm going to go with number 1, Demario Douglas. I just think, we've seen kind of glimpses of what he's able to do here over the first 6 weeks, but with the concussion, with the benching over the fumble, and just generally being a rookie in a struggling Patriots offense, he wasn't really able to show out. But I think this was really his breakout game. It wasn't crazy yardage, but he only got 4 catches for 54 yards. Had the 1 rush for 20 yards, and then the punt return for 25 yards. But I just think
Even still, you add that all up, that's I believe he led the team in all-purpose yards, kind of really contributing in all 3 of the areas there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, but it was really the manner in which he did it. I think he had the tough catch. I forget what the down and distance was. I think it was 3rd and 1 down in the red zone, where he made a really good play on a tough catch. He had the diving catch that there was a penalty on too, that I think it would have been pass interference regardless. That was a really good play. The punt return was really good. He had the end around carry where he made one guy miss. And he had I think it was the first or second play of the game, where it was a wide receiver screen, and he made a guy miss there too. So you saw a tough diving catch. You saw, a big difficult catch on a 3rd down, making guys miss in the open field, a punt return, just, the kind of the all around skill set that really he brings that nobody else on the team brings on offense, except maybe Marcus Jones, but we obviously haven't seen him in a long time. So I just think, we'll see if he's able to continue this. We'll see if Demario Douglas does turn into the next great Patriot slot receiver. But I think this was the first sign that you've gotten that maybe he could turn into that player. And while maybe bringing more than some of those players did, because I do think he has more of a raw sort of electrifying skill set than a Julian Edelman, a Wes Welker, maybe even a Troy Brown. That's not to say he's anywhere nearly as good as those guys, because those guys were, elite, just pure receivers. But just from a raw athleticism and ability standpoint, he's as good as anybody they've had in a long time.
And you see where Mac Jones is going to him in these games too, especially in this game. This was really the breakout performance that a lot of us who have watched him since the spring were kind of waiting for. You knew it was going to happen eventually. This was easily the largest workload he's gotten so far in his career, with Juju Smith-Schuster not playing in this game. And you see Mac Jones going to him on 3rd down. You see him going to him in the red zone. Douglas had a red zone reception on all 3 of the Patriots touchdown drives in this game. He drew 3 penalties, I believe, at least 2, I believe 3. He just really impacted the game in a lot of ways that, as you mentioned earlier, I don't think the traditional stat line really kind of encompasses everything that he was able to bring. We'll get into it a little bit later. I think that he needs to be a kind of fixture starring role in this offense moving forward, because just the tackle breaking ability, the elusiveness, the quickness, the playmaking ability, it's just something that nobody else on this team really has been able to replicate at all this season.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say, though, wasn't all perfect. I do think he was at fault on that kind of weird 3rd down pass where Mac Jones, the ball kind of slipped out of his hands and went up against the offensive lineman. It looked like Mac Jones kind of expected Demario Douglas to sort of squat on his route there, just kind of sit, and he kind of flashed out, and it looked like he just didn't do what Mac Jones was expecting him to do. So the ball kind of came out weird, and Mac basically just kind of threw it away. And Mac looked really animated and frustrated after that play. So I think that, to me, it looked like an example where Demario Douglas didn't do what he was supposed to do. So there's still going to be growing pains for a rookie. It's not all perfect. But my second up is going to be a close call between Trent Brown, who I think deserves credit too, who's currently actually, believe it or not, the top ranked tackle by Pro Football Focus, which you might be surprised by. And I think he was really good in this game, but I'm going to go with Farrell Brown, who I just think has emerged as, I think he's Yeah, I think third tight end. It didn't get much publicity during the offseason and training camp, but I think it was kind of a sneaky big hole for this team. They needed depth behind Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki, especially with Mike Gesicki not really a tight end. And Farrell Brown, you didn't expect much from him when he got signed to the practice squad at the end of August, but he was signed to the 53-man roster before the first game. And he's turned into a legitimately useful piece for this team. He's a solid blocker. I wouldn't say he's great or anything, but he's been a big play option in the passing game. He's got 5 catches right now, I think, for 147 yards.
137, I want to say.
137 yards, and that I think
on 5 targets too.
On 5 targets, right? It's like 27.4 yards per reception. It's only 34 yards off his career high. He had 2 for 51 in this game, a catch of 26 yards, another of 25. He had 1 for 22 that was wiped out by a Vidarian Lowe penalty. So he could have had even more. I just think, he's been legitimately good for this team. He's not just some sort of fungible, random third tight end that you've seen him tried out over the years. I think he can be a little bit more than that for this team, to the point where, like, listen, if something happened to Hunter Henry, they'd be screwed, just given how much Mac Jones trusts him in big spots, especially like as you saw in that third down late in the game on the final drive. But if an injury did happen to one of those two guys, I do think you could feel good that Farrell Brown would be a serviceable replacement, and I don't think that's a small thing.
It's been very surprising to see how effective he's been in the passing game. I think when the Patriots picked him up at the end of the preseason, everyone was like, okay, well, they need a blocking third tight end. Henry and Gesicki both aren't known as particularly good blockers. You need to get a bigger body in there, kind of play in some of those jumbo sets. All right, cool. He's got experience with Bill O'Brien in the past. Yeah, it makes sense. I don't think anybody expected this guy to come in and essentially have 25 yards every time he touched the ball. Every one of his catches so far has gone for at least 13 yards, I believe it is. As you mentioned, had the multiple 20-yard catches in this game, had the long touchdown against the Jets. He has more receiving yards than Juju Smith-Schuster this season and 7 fewer than Devontae Parker. He's as you said too, he only needs 34 to match his a single season career high, and we're not even halfway through the season yet. So yeah, if you're talking about an under the radar contributor that nobody was really expecting to do much of anything in this Patriots offense, he certainly filled that role, and he's been a shockingly valuable piece of the Patriots passing game this season, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, and he's also, I think, only like 30 yards or so off of whatever Mike Gesicki has too. I forget the exact numbers, but he's been a legitimately good player for them. I think he's only seeing like 25% of the offensive snaps, so not a ton of playing time, but it's been increasing, and I think he's been a good sort of classic diamond in the rough find for them. And he's a big target too. I think he's 6'5". Bill Belichick mentioned that after the game. So, and Mac Jones likes throwing to him, and I don't think that's not a small thing either. Just given where this offense is, and given how few options Mac Jones has that he trusts in, it seems like he has some confidence in Farrell Brown. And again, I think that's a positive development for sure.
Yeah, entertaining dude in his interviews too. So for our sake, it would be nice if he continues to play the way that he has been playing these last couple of weeks. My number one up for this game, Mac Jones. I don't think it's a stretch to call this the best game of Mac Jones' career. There are some that you can maybe choose over this one back in his rookie season, but when you consider the opponent, the way this game played out, the way it finished with the game-winning drive at the end, and just how efficient he was overall, I think this was about as good as we've seen Mac Jones in a Patriots uniform. He was 25 for 30 in the game, only had 2 incompletions rather after halftime, had as many touchdown passes as incompletions after halftime. Two of the 5 incompletions he did have in the game were on plays where the ball just kind of slipped out of his hands. You mentioned the one with Douglas on third down. He also had a screen pass to Kendrick Bourne that just didn't come out right, kind of bounced on the ground. There were really only 2 or 3 plays where you see he had a guy and just kind of missed him downfield. And I think it was a collective effort between Jones himself, Bill O'Brien, and the Patriots offensive line to kind of get him to this point. I think it was a lot of really nice play designs and play calls by O'Brien. They used a lot of motion in this game, a lot of misdirection, really relied a lot on some of these short to intermediate passes. You didn't see too many deep shots down the field from Jones. And then the offensive line play was the best that we've seen it all season. You mentioned Trent Brown still playing very well at left tackle. Seems like the Patriots have finally found an answer at right tackle, one that a lot of us have been saying that they should have gone to about a year and a half ago. They finally moved Mike Onwenu out there from right guard. He was a substantial upgrade over what they were getting at that spot from Vidarian Lowe and Calvin Anderson. We'll see if they stick with it moving forward, but I don't think they really have any reason not to, given the kind of talent that they have on that depth chart as a whole. Sidi Sow also played well in place of Onwenu at right guard. I believe the number from Pro Football Focus was Jones was pressured on just over 20% of his passes or pass attempts in this game. That number was close to 50 in the previous 3 games. So again, this is the kind of quarterback that Mac Jones is. He's not going to have success if things around him aren't working well. Things around him finally were working well in this game. And he gave the Patriots the kind of performance that they need from the quarterback that he is. Didn't have any turnovers, took care of the ball well, did have a couple weird moments. He almost had a fumble late in the game that the Patriots recovered and ended up getting wiped out by a pass interference penalty, I believe it was, downfield. But overall, on the whole, start to finish, I think this was about as good of a Mac Jones performance as we've seen from him.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you mentioned it. It wasn't perfect. I think there definitely are still signs that, and probably it's a result of just facing so much pressure, so much pass rush over the last season plus.
There was that one where he just he curled up right away. He was like, I'm not fumbling this ball. I'm just going to hang out and take a sack here.
Yeah, and I think it's led to, there are instances where he's so afraid of committing a turnover that he's just taking the sack rather than throwing it away. And I think sometimes he's seeing a rush when it's really not there. I think that was definitely an issue last week against the Raiders where, it looked like he was just expecting to get killed again. And it really wasn't that bad. But I think it's affected him so much over the last year or so that, that doesn't just go away overnight. You don't just flip a switch and go, oh, I'm suddenly not affected by that anymore. So, that did crop up a little bit in this game, but overall, I mean, he was 20 of 25. Again,
25 of 30. Yeah.
25 of 30. Sorry. Efficient, played a clean game. And, I think, again, most importantly, he showed poise and leadership in that spot at the end. So I get, full marks. I don't take anything away from him in this game, whether it changes the narrative of his career. You can't say that after one game. You got to be consistent. I said, I'm not going to write him off after the Cowboys game or the Saints game because I didn't think he was that bad. And I'm not going to go the other way on this one and say that this is confirmation that he's the franchise quarterback. He has to prove it over the body or over the entirety of a season. But this was obviously a huge step in the right direction.
I think this is a necessary one too. Like just from a reputation within the locker room standpoint, like if the Patriots lose this game in the fashion that it looked like they were going to, basically leading the entire game, defense playing well against a talented Bills offense, then you have a Kendrick Bourne fumble, you give up a short field touchdown, and then Mac Jones just kind of falls on his face in a 2-minute drill again at the end. I think there's only so much patience that you can have in a locker room for something to continuously happen like that. Even though Mac Jones had played reasonably well up to that point, played very well up to that point for stretches, I think if you lose this game, there would be a lot of griping within that Patriots locker room, even if it wasn't public, but people saying, look, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to win a game with this guy at quarterback? And there's already been reports over the last couple of weeks that there were people within that locker room that were losing faith in Jones. I think having a performance and a comeback like this is just, it's, again, we said it at the top, it's a statement. It's saying, hey, I can actually do this. Again, he needs to prove that he can consistently do this before anybody is going to say, okay, this is the Patriots franchise quarterback. But it's got to start somewhere. And I think giving the performance that he had in this game was something that he just absolutely needed to show at some point.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. We'll move over to the defensive side for my other up because as I mentioned, the Patriots defense did play very well for most of this game. Christian Barmore has been a beast lately. This was a guy that the Patriots were really high on coming out of his rookie year, had his second season basically wiped out with an injury. He only played in about half of the Patriots games last year. And I thought at the start of this year, he was relatively quiet. He wasn't bad. He just wasn't super impactful. But in these last 2 weeks, he's been in the backfield a ton. He's been making impact plays left and right. And he was exactly what the Patriots needed in this game, because they were going into this game without three of their top edge rushers, Matthew Judon, Josh Uche, Keon White, all out with injuries. They needed somebody to step up and fill that pass rush void. And in this game, that was Barmore, and that was Dietrich Wise, that was Jawan Bentley. There were a number of players who chipped in that role, but kind of the headliner of all of that was Barmore, who's really been back to looking like the player that was getting so much hype a couple of years ago. It seems like it took him a little while. I don't know if it was an injury related thing, if it just took him some time to kind of get back to full strength. But I think you're really seeing the kind of player that he can be over these last couple of weeks. And the Patriots have really needed him. I honestly was shocked with how efficiently and successfully they were able to get after Josh Allen in this game.
Yeah, agreed. And, I think it's back-to-back very good games for Barmore. I'd say that's, 3 or 4 really good games he's had this season. I think it's just, the key for him has always been consistency, not just in terms of health, but just in terms of on-field performance. The big questions with him have always been, can he stay healthy? Can he be consistent? And can he play well enough against the run to earn a significant playing time? And I think he's, answering all those questions this season in a positive way. I wouldn't say he's fully arrived as this sort of, dominant sort of Chris Jones-like force that, I think people hope he can be. But he's been really good. And, I do think it was interesting how a couple of days before this game, and Jeremy Fowler of ESPN had one of those long sort of all-encompassing trade stories about different rumors that he's hearing around the league. And there was just one blurb in there about the Patriots, where teams around the league were saying, which Patriots players were going to generate interest, which they would call about to see if they were available. And the players you'd expect, the pending free agents, Kyle Duggar, Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Mills, all those guys are mentioned, but Christian Barmore was also in there, which I thought was, surprising, and seemed like, if they give up someone like Christian Barmore, that feels like an all-in on the rebuild move. I was surprised that it didn't say that the Patriots were shopping him. It just said other teams were curious if he would be available. And when I read that, it sounds like maybe there's more there. Maybe there's something going on there on both sides. So it's just maybe something to keep an eye on. But again, I think this game proved why Christian Barmore is someone who the Patriots should be looking to hold on to for a while if he can play this way.
Shifting over, down. Who was your one down from this game?
One down, the defensive backs. I don't think it was a terrible game coverage-wise. I think they did a good job, especially limiting Stephon Diggs. But the missed tackles are just ridiculous. They've been an issue. They were an issue in the Cowboys game, in the Saints game, Jalen Mills especially, and they were a huge issue in this game. Jack Jones had one, Jabril Peppers had one, Kyle Duggar had one. I think Miles Bryant had one. I think Jalen Mills had another one too. It was all game. And I don't know why that's happening. I'm sure they're drilling this point home in practice, and for whatever reason, the issue is persisting. But you can bet it'll be a focus of practice this week.
Yeah, you can, rewatching the game, if you take out a couple of these missed tackles, the Bills probably score 10, 14 points in this game. Maybe there was a blatant missed tackle on the James Cook touchdown early in the game. That was on third down.
And the Stephon Diggs touchdown. Yeah.
Yep. And the Stephon Diggs touchdown. I didn't actually realize how blatant it was until I rewatched it, because he essentially caught the pass, laid down on the ground, then stood up and ran straight through JC Jackson into the end zone. There are also a couple on third down, some of those long third down conversions that you would imagine would have forced either field goal tries or punts. So yeah, something that the Patriots have always prided themselves in. They've always been reasonably good at tackling, but that's definitely been an issue for them these last couple of weeks, and certainly was in this game. I thought overall they did their best job of limiting Stephon Diggs that they've really ever done, other than the wind game. back in 2021. He was targeted 12 times, only finished with 58 yards and that one touchdown that probably should not have been a touchdown if JC Jackson was able to make that tackle. But I do think that after watching it a little bit more closely, the Patriots pass rush had a very significant role in that. A lot of the passes to Diggs were while Allen was scrambling, some of them while he was essentially running out of bounds or jumping out of bounds. And then Allen just missed some throws too. There were plays that Diggs was open and Allen just wasn't able to hit him. I don't know if that was wind related or the fact that he was just kind of off of his game yesterday, but wasn't as much of a kind of lockdown coverage performance that maybe it seemed like in the moment. But at the end of the day, the stats still were there, and Diggs did not torch the Patriots for 120 yards like he typically does. Going over to my one down, I'll go back to the offensive side. Devontae Parker had a strange level of usage in this game. He played fewer snaps than Kendrick Bourne, fewer snaps than Demario Douglas, and even fewer snaps than Jalen Reagor, who was called up from the practice squad for the third time this season. Wasn't targeted in this game until the Patriots' final drive. He did make a catch for 8 yards to help continue to move the Patriots down the field on that drive. But again, as we've talked about in recent weeks, this is a guy you gave a contract extension to over the offseason, is expected to be arguably the number one receiver on this team, especially with Juju Smith-Schuster struggling as badly as he has.
He did play. Real quick, I think he played more snaps than Jalen Reagor.
Did he?
It's
I
35.
thought he was less than Joe.
It's 35 to 25 on NFL Jesus. But either way,
okay.
But that's mostly because of the final drive. I think it was.
There were long stretches. Yeah, we were sitting up in the press box watching this game, saying, where is Devontae Parker? Why is he not playing right now? It seemed like the Patriots were rolling with Bourne, Douglas, and Reagor for a large portion of this game. And the snap rate that Parker did have, I believe, was like 58%. It was his lowest of the season. Tyquan Thornton also hardly played in this game. He only got 3 snaps and was targeted once. We haven't seen a real productive Devontae Parker game since week 2, since the first game he played in this season. He's been very quiet in the last 4 or 5 games that he's appeared in. And I'm really curious moving forward what the Patriots receiver depth chart is going to look like. I mean, this can even dovetail right into the next topic we have here of with Demario Douglas playing as well as he has, Kendrick Bourne being as impactful as he has been, even though he did have the potentially costly fumble in this game. Are you going to start seeing those two guys be the quote unquote 1 and 2 options on this team? And what is that going to mean for guys like Smith-Schuster once he gets healthy and gets back in the lineup, and Parker, who just hasn't really brought much of anything to this roster in close to 2 months, a month and a half? Just those are two guys that were supposed to be the number 1 and the number 2 on this team, and they just really have not been performing to that level at all.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. Like if the Patriots go 12 personnel and they're going to do 2 receivers, I think that has to be Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas. I don't think there's any real debate about that at this point. And then if they do 3 wideouts, I mean, maybe you do some sort of rotation between Devontae Parker and Tyquan Thornton. I mean, I just don't think from kind of his sloppy route running to just not coming down with the 50-50 balls. Like I would like to see them just go all in on Douglas, Kendrick Bourne, and Tyquan Thornton just for the speed. It'd be kind of interesting because we always talk about how they have no speed on offense and they're a slow receiving corps, and there's truth to that when you look at obviously Parker and Smith-Schuster. But they could have a really fast group if they just did Thornton, Douglas, and Kendrick Bourne, let alone if Marcus Jones was still around. But and then I think the real question is once Juju Smith-Schuster comes back, how that works itself out. But I think right now, they'd be foolish to do anything other than Demario Douglas and Kendrick Bourne as their top 2 receivers. I mean, there's risk in it. Those guys do have some issues running the wrong routes. But I just think from a pure ability standpoint, like they don't really have another option. I think they have to go that way. And I just think Devontae Parker is what he is at this point, which is not very useful. So
yeah, and I think you already saw it trending in this direction, even when Smith-Schuster was active and playing. Going back as far as week 1, Demario Douglas was the slot receiver in those 2-minute drill packages. not Juju Smith-Schuster. And the big question is going to be, if everybody's active next week, is Demario Douglas starting over Smith-Schuster in the slot? I mean, I think he certainly should be based on everything that he's shown so far and everything that Juju has not shown. But it also, I mean, I personally wouldn't be surprised if this is a multi-week absence for Juju. Not reporting anything there. That's just speculating, but guy coming back from a concussion, maybe the Patriots just say, hey, take an extra couple of weeks. We're liking what we're working with right now. You're probably not going to have a huge role, even if you are back in the lineup. Maybe let's reassess in a couple of weeks. I don't know. That's just pure speculation on my part, but I just don't know what the role Smith-Schuster has on this team right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, him being inactive yesterday did feel kind of healthy, scratchy.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, I'm not to say he's not really dealing with a concussion, but I don't know. It just would be convenient because I don't think he's playable right now. I think he's been pretty much the worst receiver on the team. And, if you make him a healthy scratch, that creates a whole another set of, noise that the team doesn't need. And that it's not a good look for Smith-Schuster. It's not really doing right by him. So, I could totally see why they would just keep labeling it as a concussion, but who knows? Regardless, though, when he does come back, I'll be interested to see if the time off helps him regain some of the juice, that maybe has been lost by that offseason knee procedure and what apparently is taking him a long time to come back from it. I mean, the question is, can he ever get that back, or is it gone? Is it gone for good? We'll find out. But the player that we saw before suffering the concussion absolutely does not deserve to play over Demario Douglas or Kendrick Bourne for that matter. I think he'd be 4th or 5th on the depth chart, which is obviously, we've talked about this a lot, but that's an indictment for a player who is supposed to be the top offseason acquisition.
Optimist view. You got to hope maybe an extra couple of weeks off of that surgically repaired knee maybe can inject some more of the juice that we just haven't seen from him this season. But again, we don't know if he can ever get back to that point. And who knows, we may even see a roster move involving Jalen Reagor at some point this week. He's out of practice squad of elevations, but Patriots clearly like him enough to give him about 20 snaps in each of these last 2 games. They clearly prefer him over someone like Kayshon Boutte at this point, who hasn't played since week 1. So if they want to use him again, they're going to have to add him to the 53-man roster, which you would imagine probably pushes somebody out. So that's a kind of under the radar storyline to follow this week. And speaking of this week, I don't think it's hyperbole to call this an essentially a make or break game for the Patriots. If the Patriots win this week down in Miami, where they haven't won since, I believe, 2019, have not won at all with Mac Jones as their quarterback, then they're sitting at 3-5, still not an especially favorable record, but you're right back in the mix in the AFC East, having just beaten the 2 top teams in that division. I think if they reach that point, they have to feel reasonably good about their ability to be at least relevant going into the second half of the season, especially because the games that they have after that all should be winnable. You're talking about Washington, Indianapolis, the Giants, the Chargers. They play Denver down the stretch. They play Pittsburgh. They have a much more favorable second half schedule than their first half. So these 2 weeks really could be a springboard for this team to get back into the conversation in that way. And then on the other side, if you come out, lose this game, you're 2-6, your season is essentially over going into the trade deadline. At that point, do they say, okay, we gave it a good run, but now it's time to trade Kendrick Bourne, to trade Josh Uche, to see what you can get for Mike Owenu or Kyle Duggar or any of those names that we've mentioned. So it's really kind of a crossroads point for the Patriots. It's win and you're feeling pretty good about this team, lose and you're basically right back to where you were a week ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This definitely is the season in this game. And, I don't know. I haven't looked at, let's do some quick some quick weather forecasting to see what the weather's going to look like this weekend. Right now, I mean, this is Google, it's imperfect, but it says 84 degrees. Certainly not the worst that they've ever dealt with down there. I tend to think that this timing is better than either getting it during the middle of the winter when it's particularly jarring, or at the beginning of the season as it was last year, where you're like, well, yeah, we're dealing with the hot weather here too, but it is on another level at that time of the year down in Miami.
110 degrees and humid. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because it's hot and humid in New England doesn't mean it feels the same in Miami. It feels that much worse down there. And, to the Patriots' credit, and they went down early to help acclimate, and I'm sure that helped. But overall, I don't think the weather was a big issue in that game. I think pass protection was the issue in that game. So I think the weather hopefully isn't a big deal in this game. 84 degrees is not a huge deal. I think what's really interesting is this is I think a good spot for the Patriots. You have a Miami team that's coming off a tough loss to the Eagles. So yeah, maybe you say that they're motivated, but I think it's a classic trap game where they just faced the Eagles. That's a tough physical team that's really difficult to play against. The Dolphins have the Chiefs next weekend. So, maybe they're in the spot where we just play the Eagles. We got to deal with the Chiefs next week. We kind of forgot we have the Patriots this weekend.
Already got at least a split with the Patriots.
Yeah, like just a classic look ahead game. And again, maybe the Patriots also at the right time where maybe they're feeling themselves a little bit. And maybe they catch fire here. So we'll have to see. I without Christian Gonzalez, I wonder if they're going to be able to, have the same success against Miami's passing attack as they did in that first game. I think the final score masked how that game really went. I think the Dolphins are really able to do whatever they wanted when they really wanted to. And you wonder if they're even further along this game, and without Gonzalez out there, can the Patriots really hang with them? But I think it's really just about the offense. The offense is going to have to score over 25 again this game, I think, for sure. Then we'll see what happens. But yeah, there's no doubt about it where, if they lose this game, I think the season's definitely over. You're getting into we need a miracle territory. Whereas if they win, I think it absolutely creates a fascinating conversation ahead of the trade deadline.
Yeah, big offensive line game. Obviously, Patriots offensive line coming off probably its best game of the season. They were very bad up front against Miami in week 2. Mac Jones was sacked 4 times. They couldn't run the ball at all. Calvin Anderson was really rough in that game. It was Andrew Van Ginkel, backup edge rusher, just really ate his lunch from start to finish. If the Patriots can protect Mac Jones the way they did this past week against Buffalo, I think they'll certainly put themselves in a much better position. And I'm really interested to see defensively how they adjust to some of the Mike McDaniel wrinkles that really gave them problems back in week 2. If you remember that game, that was one of the early kind of iterations of the cheat motion that they've been using so frequently now that Miami has, when you send Tyreek Hill sprinting toward the sideline right before the play and just essentially give him a running start. We saw a lot of that back in week 2, a lot of very quick passes from Tua Tagovailoa. And even though the Patriots did essentially limit Tyreek Hill for most of that game, Tua had a lot of success throwing to some of those secondary targets, the Braxton Berrioses and the River Craycrafts and guys like that. So seeing a team for the second time in the season, I'm really interested to see just how Bill Belichick and Steve Belichick and Gerard Mayo are able to kind of counter some of those things that they saw back in week 2 without, as you mentioned, no Christian Gonzalez in this game. But before we sign off here, we need to discuss the big non-game related news that came out of Sunday. A couple of hours before kickoff, Ian Rappaport from NFL Network reported that Bill Belichick agreed to terms and signed a new Patriots contract this past offseason. The terms of that contract were not reported. Bill Belichick's contract is one of the most closely guarded secrets in all of American sports, really. And there have been conflicting reports and conflicting speculation about how long-term it is. There have been multiple reporters who have said that they would be shocked if it extends beyond the 2024 season. But Rappaport said earlier today that it covers the next several years. Is that how he termed it? So we don't know exactly what the contract looks like. The contract won't preclude Robert Kraft from potentially making a move after this season if that is what he chooses to do. But it is certainly a new wrinkle that must be considered in any of these discussions about what the Patriots are going to do with Bill Belichick if their season kind of turns back downward.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of all this. It's certainly, I think and we're not going to get them, but what would be nice to know is, what are the real details here beyond the terms? Because, is there a situation where could there be deferred payments? Could there be something like, if the Patriots, could there be a clause where if the Patriots trade Bill Belichick, that they have to pick up some of the money remaining on the contract? All this other stuff, all this stuff that can be put in there that adds context to how easy or not easy it would be to move on from him beyond just the length of the contract. But to me, I mean, what's apparent right now is that you have Belichick's camp putting this out for very obvious reasons, and you have the ownership side putting their own side to this. And I mean, if that's what's going on, and that's what it feels like to me, then you have the ownership and the legendary head coach kind of, using the media, in a bit of a power struggle or a power play, which I mean is, pretty crazy. And so we'll have to see what happens. I think, I know Tommy Curran was pretty definitive in reporting that whatever the contract situation is, it will not preclude the Crafts from moving on from Belichick in the offseason. So even if this is all an effort by Belichick to say, getting rid of me isn't going to be that easy, it seems like, the two sides still could part ways if that's what the ownership wants to do. But, we'll just have to see how the story develops. But right now it's conflicting information on both sides. That is pretty interesting to watch develop.
Yeah, it does seem like something that most likely came out of the Belichick side of the conversation,
100%.
just because there really wouldn't be any benefit for the team side, the Kraft side, the ownership side of leaking this information out there. There are a lot of questions that it raises, obviously. One of them, what's the plan with Gerard Mayo? If the Patriots were able to convince him to stay by signing him to a new contract, but also signed Bill Belichick to a long-term extension, how do you square those two things? Since you imagine part of convincing Mayo to stay was, if not an outright promise, at least hey, when Bill leaves, you're clearly going to be the number one guy in charge. Can you say that and also sign Bill Belichick through 2026 at the same time? Probably not. Again, hopefully we'll get some additional details about this week. I'm sure there'll be some rumblings about it that will come out, even though we're unlikely to get any of the actual concrete years and monetary details. But and getting a win like this, at the very least, kind of pushed off those conversations for a little while. We certainly aren't talking and writing quite as much about Bill Belichick potentially losing his job as we were last week or 2 weeks ago or the week before that. But again, it's the single biggest storyline to follow, probably in the NFL over the rest of the season, depending on how the Patriots fare in these next couple of games. I think that will do it. Dakota, anything final to add here before we sign off?
Yes, because I have been being an unhelpful podcast host and crunching a bunch of numbers while you've been talking, so not totally paying attention.
I was saying interesting stuff too. You missed it.
I know. Well, no, I did hear what
it wasn't interesting. It wasn't interesting.
But I was doing it so I could come up with this. I've been trying to figure out how many teams have started 1-5 and made the playoffs, or 2-5 and made the playoffs. So going back to what we were saying about the Dolphins game. So teams that have started 1-5 and still gone on to make the playoffs, there are 4 of them: the 1970 Cincinnati Bengals, the 2015 Kansas City Chiefs, the 2018 Indianapolis Colts, and the 2020 Washington football team. And very quickly, I will check for the hold on, the Jeopardy music. I will check for the other one too. Okay, and
we've got to get 2-5 and 1-6 though.
2-5. Well,
because they already were 1-5.
That's what I mean. I'm saying so
Oh.
if they go on to make the playoffs this season, they will be the 5th team to have started 1-5 and gone
Yeah.
on to make the playoffs. And then in terms of teams that were 2-5, because that can be, you don't have to be 1-5 to also be 2-5. You could have gone 2-0 and then lost your next 5 games, right? So
True.
teams that at some point in their season were 2-5, that went on to make the playoffs. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. And the last one was actually the Jacksonville Jaguars last season. So not unprecedented. But again, it's long odds for the Patriots. I don't know about 2-6. I guess while we're at it, I mean, I might as well figure it out. So if they lose this weekend,
I was gonna say I've got to imagine while you're crunching here, I've got to imagine sitting at 3-5 and sitting at 2-6 is reasonably different. I feel like 2-6, you're like, okay, our season's essentially over unless we almost run the table.
So
2-5, you got a little, or 3-5, you got a little bit more wiggle room,
Yeah, 2-6 there's 3 teams. The 70 Bengals, the 2020 Washington football team, and the 2022 Jacksonville Jaguars. 3-5, I can find that out very quickly. 5, and this is great radio. It is, yeah, many more examples. Too many to count. It looks like at least like 15 or 20. With the last team being the 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Niners and Eagles both did it in 2021. So yeah, 3-5, you're you absolutely can pull that off. But it's not unprecedented if they lose this weekend, but odds would be against them. But yeah, 3-5, and you're right back in the conversation for sure.
Hopefully people stuck around for these final few minutes. Some thrilling math talk to close out this week of the NESN Patriots
I have a
podcast.
possible headache now.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for sticking through that. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Zack Coxnet, or on X at Zack NESN. You can follow Dakota at Dak Randall, and you can follow along with all of our Patriots coverage leading up to this Sunday's game in Miami at NESN.com.